Hi everybody, welcome to First Chapter Fridays. My name is Dawn, I work here at the Alameda Library, and today I'm going to be reading the first chapter from a new book called World Made of Glass by Ami Polonaky. We have the book here at the library and it's also available on ebook on Libby. This is about a girl whose dad is dying. She's kind of dealing with it on her own. She hasn't told her friends. It's just a few people that know within her family, and it's about how she deals with that and the prejudice around her dad's illness. And it's a sad book, but it's a very, very good book. So I do recommend it. Okay, here we go. Here's chapter 1. Dad is dying. I pushed through the after-school crowd in the hallway, repeating the sentence to myself. Dad is dying. Dad is dying. With each word, I planted one of my hot pink Converse onto the centre of a scuffed floor tile. No stepping on cracks. I didn't used to be the superstitious type, but these days new worries popped into my head constantly. Maybe repeating the thought over and over and over again would help me to understand it. Dad is dying. And just this morning, Mum said it wouldn't be long now. Dad is dying. The words pounded through my mind on loop as I passed the lunchroom and nurse's office. Rounding the corner by the gym, I almost ran into Miss Staffio. Startled, she hopped to the side to avoid me. Iris, she exclaimed. I was probably imagining it, but she seemed disgusted, as if nearly bumping into me could contaminate her. Then she patted her already neat bun. Pay attention to where you're going, please. She forced a smile and adjusted the teacher's edition of our science textbook under her arm. I was just on my way to make some photocopies, but I was hoping to see you. I wanted to ask you something. I took one more step to complete my thought, dying, before responding. Okay, I said. She looked at me strangely, and for a second I thought I saw a flicker of something different in her eyes. Sympathy? But no, it couldn't be. Nobody, not even my best friends, knew that Dad was sick. You're off to philanthropy club, I presume. Yes, I answered. Wonderful. The gerbil's cage really could do with the cleaning. Will you pass that on to the group? I mean, unless you have something more philanthropic on the agenda. I couldn't tell you'd been sarcastic. Everyone knew that the philanthropy club was an afternoon activity you joined if your parents insisted that you get involved and you had nothing better to do. Miss Staffio smoothed her hair again and adjusted the already perfect colour of her white blouse. Everything about her was so judgmental, and even though I'd gotten really good at not caring what people thought about me and my family, I wondered what was going through her mind. That Iris, I imagined her thinking in a snooty tone. She looks so dishevelled. Somebody ought to take her for a bangs trim. Her hair is dangling into her eyes. And on the topic of her eyes, why are they so droopy and bloodshot? It's like she hasn't slept in ages. Must be that odd family of hers. Must be because her dad is, well, you know, gay. In my mind, she'd whisper the last word, gay, because it was so unthinkable. Well, if those were Miss Staffio's thoughts, she would have been right about my appearance. I hadn't been able to find my hairbrush this morning, and my bangs were hanging into my eyes for weeks because everyone at home had been too distracted by Dad dying to take me to his barber at the corner for a bang trim. And my eyes were bloodshot from not sleeping enough, because when your dad is sick, the nightmares claw at you until you wake up, and half of your mind is in your bedroom and you're looking out your darkened 8th-storey window over Greenwich Village, dotted with street lights and car lights, and sometimes a 2 a.m. siren, but the other half of your brain has never seen this bedroom before, has never seen a bedroom at all, actually. The window glass might not even be there, and it's probably not. And if you roll over, you'll be falling through 8 stories of thin, too cold March air to the sidewalk below. Iris, Miss Staffio said, as if I wasn't the first time she'd tried to get my attention. Yeah? I asked. The perimeter around the tiles appeared to be shrinking. Moving close to my shoes, I clenched and unclenched my toes. You'll clean out the garbage cage today. They're starting to stink. Extra garbage bags are in the cabinet. Oh yeah, I told her. The gerbils. Sure. She tilted her head to the side as if exhausted by our conversation, or at the very least confused, and walked away. I gave up stepping in the centre of the tiles. In Mr. English's room, Toby and Will were already at the back table. They were weird and annoying, and I loved hanging out with them. Being in the same room as my closest friends made the tightness in my stomach disappear. I allowed myself to forget about how condescending Miss Staffio was as I joined them. No way, Toby was saying emphatically, while wiping his always stuffy nose with the back of his hand, his eyes wide with enthusiasm about whatever young Bill was debating. There is no way that a half-eaten Charleston chew with your slobber cooties all over it, a bag of probably stale pretzels and mini muffins are worth that unopened 2-pack of snowballs. How gullible do you think I am? He caressed and then kissed his package of pink Hostess snowballs. Significantly gullible, Will replied. And can I point out that you're making out with your after-school snack? He continued grinning as he leaned back into his chair and rested his shoes on the table next to his Charleston chew. He poured the entire bag of mini muffins into his mouth and suppressed a cough. Dad's sickness loosened its grip on my shoulders as I watched Will attempt to chew. Slobbery bits of muffin escaped his mouth, falling onto his lap. He picked them up one by one and poked them right back into his clenched lips. I pretended to gag. I hope you know CPR and the Heimlich tone, I said, because if he chokes, there's no way I'm saving him. Hello to you too, Toby said, wiping his nose on the back of his hand again. Will rocked back on his chair legs, waved and continued chewing. Grinning, I ran over to the classroom window and cracked it open. Cold March air tumbled in. Mallory! I screamed into the void. Why did you have to move? Toby, Will and I laughed as a bunch of kids on the playground turned to look in my direction. I feel so sorry for you now that she's in Philly now, Will said as I relatched the window. Like, seriously sorry. He rubbed his buzz cut. Will was the only African-American kid in our school. Since becoming friends with him, Toby and Mallory the year before, I'd wondered how he felt being one of the only kids at our private school who wasn't white. But that wasn't kind of the thing anyone ever talked about. So for now, I just wondered how he managed to chew that entire package of mini muffins in one swoop without choking. I smiled at him, glad that he hadn't needed the Heimlich over muffins. Thanks, I told him. I feel sorry for me too. Mallory, the 4th grade misfit, former member of the philanthropy club, dungeon master and my best friend, had moved to Philadelphia over winter break. We talked on the phone every Sunday after dinner, and I'd seen her a few times when she and her family had come into the city, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her that Dad was sick. Toby ripped open his snowballs, pink coconuts spilling onto the table, and motioned to one of them. Go ahead, he said. Yes, come to Papa, Will sang, pulling a snowball in two, handing one piece to me and shoving his half in his mouth. I licked the sugary pink coating off the white marshmallow exterior. I was usually able to forget about the whole dang thing for a while at Philanthropy Club, and I was pretty sure that Mum suspected this, which was likely why she still insisted that I go, even though all I really wanted to do after school was to race to Dad and JR's apartment. Oh, Miss Staffio wants us to clean the gerbils, I told Will and Toby. Clean the gerbils? Toby asked, laughing, as he took a giant bite. Pink coconut stuck to the tip of his nose, and I wondered if his snot had served as glue. Hey, Will chimed in, do you have a toothbrush? We can lather the gerbils up in the science room sink and scrub them with a toothbrush and then put them in like little robes. Did you just ask me if I had a toothbrush? Toby interrupted. Sure, I brought my toothbrush to school and I want to use it to clean Stiffio's gophers. Will cracked up. Gophers, he asked. Man, they're gerbils. What's the difference? Toby asked, hopping up and grabbing the G encyclopedia from Mr. English's bookshelf. I wandered back to the window, wishing again that Mallory was still here. I wondered if she hadn't moved, would I finally be able to tell her about Dad? She wasn't the type to judge anybody, but still, I didn't know. I licked sticky goo from my fingertips while peering out into the now empty playground. Will's and Toby's voices faded into the background, and just when I woke from a nightmare, I was halfway in the real world and halfway disconnected. A gopher is a burrowing rodent with fur-lined pouches on the inside of its cheeks, Toby read. Outside the window, some of the dirty snow piles still lingered, like Manhattan didn't know whether it was winter or spring. I remember being little, when it was just me, Mum and Dad, back before everything got so complicated. Mum and Dad loved each other then. They still love each other, I reminded myself. A gust of wind shook the empty swings and rattled the windows as Toby went on. Man, if I had little fuzzy pockets in my cheeks, that would be awesome. I'd fill them with jawbreakers and nobody would ever know. Or hot pockets. Look up gerbils. I want to know if gerbils have furry mouth pockets. They both cracked up some more. Across the street was Gramercy Park, its trees just starting to bud, and beyond it, past Union Square, was NYU, where JR worked and where Dad used to work back before he got too sick to do anything. A gerbil is an old world burrowing desert rodent, Toby read. What the heck? An old world rodent? Are Stiffio's gerbils time travellers? I turned back to Toby and Will, trying to smile. They could have gone on forever, talking about mouth pockets, hot pockets, rodents and time travel. I wished I could care about that stuff again. I looked through a little window in the doorway to where Mr. English was saying something at the top, over the top of someone's kid's head. But the time he came in, the blonde mop of hair had disappeared. It's the philanthropic clubbers, he announced, pushing his glasses upon his nose, the fluorescent lights bouncing off his shiny bald head. He was the dorkiest and best teacher in the school. A while back, Mallory, Will, Toby and I made a banner that said 7th grade English with English is in bubble letters is the best, hanging above the blackboard. That was the type of philanthropy project we could manage. The sign was still there. What's on the agenda for today? Mr. English went on. I liked that he took us seriously, even though we never had anything on our agenda beyond random projects and playing Dungeons and Dragons when we were done. It was almost like he was waiting for the day that we'd finally announce our plans to save the world. I was kind of waiting for that day too. We're going to clean Miss I caught myself and Mr. English had a smile. Miss Taffio's gerbils. Not the animals, their cage. Then we'll probably try and play D&D with a bad DM and only 2 players, which definitely isn't fun. Toby chimed in as I glanced at the clock, no longer distracted by Will, Toby and the philanthropy club. I wanted to get home to see how Dad was doing. Mr. English looked thoughtful for a minute, then he pushed his glasses over his nose. I'll talk to Miss Staffio for you, he said. Skip the hamster cage for the day. Will, Toby and I burst into laughter. Gerbil, Toby corrected, still laughing. Ah, yes, gerbil. Iris, he asked. Help me out with something. I looked at Will and Toby, shrugged and joined him in the empty hallway where afternoon sunbeams slanted through the windows. So, Mr. English sort of said awkwardly once he closed the classroom door, I'm just wondering, what I'm trying to say, he stammered. He said, how are you doing? I saw myself reflected in his thick glasses and thought of how I imagined myself in Miss Staffio's eyes. Mr. English wasn't like her. He actually cared. Looking down, I noticed that I was standing on the edges of the floor tiles and I adjusted my shoes so they weren't touching the cracks. After Dad had found out that he had AIDS, I'd overheard him talking in his and JR's apartment about whether they should let my teachers know that he was sick. She'll need support, Mum had said curtly. I'd stopped outside the door, key in hand, and pressed my ear to the metal to listen. It had been this past September, which was near the end of Mum's angry phase, and a full year after she and Dad had separated. They'll treat her like a leper, Dad had said, with finality. Mum had probably agreed, so that was the end of that conversation. As far as I knew, nobody outside Mum, Dad, my grandparents, JR, and their new friend Bob knew that Dad had AIDS. Nobody else knew that he was dying. Sure, people knew that Dad was gay and that he and Mum had gotten divorced because of it at the beginning of 6th grade, and plenty of them cared way too much about that, but that was their problem, not mine. Iris, Mr. English prodded. Oh, I'm fine, I guess. Unless people at school had somehow found out, why had Mr. English pulled me into the hall to see how I was doing? I started to feel nauseous from the snowball. Marshmallows always made me feel sick. You could talk to him about it, a small voice in my head told me. He wouldn't treat you like an outcast. He's Mr. English. English. Suddenly the thought of telling Mr. English about Dad, about the AIDS, about the dying, felt such a relief, but before I could open my mouth, he began to speak again. Glad to hear that things are fine, Iris. That's real good. So listen, there's a new student. I thought you might see if you wanted to join the philanthropy club. He's kind of reluctant to get involved, and I'm trying to help him make some connections. I closed my eyes for a second and envisioned the window beside my bed in the middle of the night. In my mind, the outside air was thick, humid. The way the air in the doorway suddenly felt. There was no glass in the window, no screen. If I rolled over, I'd fall. At the end of the hallway, a mop of curly hair reappeared. Beneath it was a boy. I'll go talk to Miss Staffio, Mr. English said, about the gerbils. For a minute he seemed like he was going to pat me on the shoulder, but instead he clasped his hands behind his back. Then he disappeared around the corner. I looked the new kid over as he approached. Mr. English was right. The boy didn't seem to want to be in this nearly empty after-school hallway at 3:15 on a Thursday afternoon. His hands were stuffed into his blue jean pockets, and he took his time walking over, like he might swerve at the last minute and head for the front doors instead. But he didn't. Hi, he said when he stepped in front of us. His eyes were very blue, and despite everything terrible, I couldn't help noticing that he was kind of cute. Hey, I said more self-consciously than I meant to. Hi, he said again, looking down at his feet. I looked down at mine. They stood diagonally across the lines of the dials, but I ignored the urge to move them. I'm Iris. Julian. I nodded, feeling suddenly awkward. So, Mr. English, you said that. Mr. English said that you might be interested in joining Phil. Yeah, sure. Jim replied before I could even finish the sentence. I opened the classroom door. Inside, Will and Toby stood at opposite ends of a long table. Will held a slingshot made of a forked tree branch and rubber band. It was his latest geeky simple machine, which he insisted on calling a catapult, and he was preparing to use it to fling a pretzel into Toby's open mouth. 3, 2, 1, launch! He yelled. The pretzel flew through the air, hit Toby on the forehead, and broke into pieces. I glanced at Julian from the corner of my eye. He seemed to be suppressing a smile, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. That they were dorks, that we his kind of people. I introduced him to Will and Toby. Where'd you move from? Will asked, loading another pretzel into his slingshot. Most recently, Indiana, Julian said, but he looked away like he didn't want to talk about it, so I changed the subject. You play D&D? I asked, wondering if he'd make a good DM. Yeah, he replied. Cool, what's your character? Will wanted to know. Elven fighter. Would you say a half Charleston chew, a bag of pretzels and a package of mini muffins are worth as much as 2 snowballs? Toby asked, scooping up some pretzel pizzas and tossing them in the garbage can. Julian picked at his fingernails. Definitely not. He squeezed out a half smile. On the one hand, Julian's reluctance to talk made him seem way too cold for us. On the other hand, I had the sense that he was holding himself back from diving right into our nerdy conversations. Mum says that everyone assumes that they're the only one with struggles, but in reality, we're all dealing with something. Julian's situation, whatever it was, felt like a relief. It was a visible reminder that there's something weird about all of us. Bombs away! Will yelled, bringing my attention back to the classroom. He wiggled his eyebrows and launched a pretzel towards me and Julian. We ducked as it sailed over our heads and broke against a wall. I turned to Julian. Welcome to the Philanthropy Club. That's the end of chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed what you heard and it gave you the impetus to read more. It is a great book. And yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.